Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Horror Talk. This is episode 8, and we're gonna take a look at CZsWorld's content. And um, I only watched the I watched some of his stuff, and I enjoy them. I just sorry, mean bread. I just never had a chance to take a look, take a deep dive in his content. I'm just gonna be watching his shit and commentating at the same time. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen to you guys. And so you can watch it with me, and I'll say some things. If you guys can hear me, just let me know. Um, start with the. Ooh, that's so loud. Let's start with the original Michael Myers timeline. Let's take a look. Now, I liked, that timeline, the Halloween 4, 5, 6, and yeah, I didn't mind it. So let's take a look.
Welcome to Horror History, and welcome aboard the Halloween Express. The Halloween timeline can be a little bit confusing at times. We've got many different continuities branching out from the first two movies. Then we've got a reboot, which isn't connected to anything, and Halloween 3, a separate world where the original Halloween is just a movie. On top of that, there are comics and novels whose status in the canon can be kind of unclear. So to make things easy for this episode, we're going to be traveling right down to the original as we analyze horror's most iconic slash. Michael Myers was named after a real-life Michael Myers by the original director John Carpenter, who wanted to honor the European distributor of his previous film, Assault on Precinct 13. To understand how Michael became the soulless and immortal killer that he is, we've got to take it way back to about 500 BC.
Hold on, let me see if is he gonna, okay, there you go. Is he gonna talk about the Samhain? That's how you say it. Because in Halloween 2, they put Samhain on the wall, so maybe that was the Cult of Thorn.
The Myers family is descended from an ancient Druid tribe who worshipped great astronomical deities. The Druids were a mysterious Celtic order known for their studies of religious scriptures, philosophy, astronomy, and divine lore. They were said to make sacrifices, which sometimes included human sacrifices for the sick or injured, which allegedly included the burning of huge wickerwork figures filled with men. Not much is known of the Druid culture because they did not keep any records, but around 500 BCE, they did create an ancient alphabet carved into stone and wood runes. These runes were used for pagan rituals in order to help the tribe predict future events. One of the icons was the symbol of Thorn, which was designed after the Thorn constellation and was used to represent an ancient demon that plagued the Celtic people.
Among the ancient Druids, Thorn represented a demon that spread sickness, destroyed crops, brought death to hundreds of thousands of people. According to Celtic legend, one child from each tribe was chosen to be inflicted with the curse of Thorn.
While knowledge of the demon Thorn faded into legend over the coming millennia, the bloodline of the tribe stayed intact, and one offshoot of the population ended up in the Midwest region of the United States. They continued to
This is actually a cool explanation. I'm not gonna lie, I actually like this explanation, this timeline with Halloween 4, 5, and 6. I liked it. If you're gonna explain Michael Myers' backstory, what is it gonna be? This is the best it's been. So yeah.
Practiced their ritualistic sacrifices in fear of the malicious demon, and they called themselves the Cult of Thorn. In the early 1960s, the leader of the cult was a man by the name of Terrence Wynn, who worked at the sanitarium known as Smith's Grove by day and used the facility as a meeting place and worship ground by night.
One child from each tribe was chosen to be inflicted with the curse of Thorn, to offer the blood sacrifices of its next of kin on the night of Samhain.
Halloween.
The sacrifice of one family meant sparing...
See, it ties back to Halloween 2 with the Samhain on the wall. Because remember, Loomis is looking at it, he's like, what does this mean? So this is what it is.
The lives of an entire tribe.
So Dr. Wynn believed that if he and his cult placed the curse of Thorn on one child, the child would be compelled to kill his entire family, but the rest of the tribe would be protected from things like disease, death, plague, and drought for an entire generation. I do not know how their selection process went, but Dr. Wynn ends up choosing a 6-year-old boy by the name of Michael Audrey Myers. The curse must be placed during the Festival of Samhain. which is a Gaelic festival of pagan origin where the barrier would supposedly
Shit.
be down between the real and the unreal, allowing sacrifices, be those crops, animals, or in the case of the Halloween movies, human sacrifices, to be made. Samhain takes place
Huh.
every year at the end of the harvest season. Today, in the Northern Hemisphere, we call that Halloween Nights. However, in the eyes of the cult, some Halloween nights were more special than others.
The Druids were also great mathematicians and astronomers, but the thorn symbol is actually a constellation of stars that appears from time to time on Halloween night.
But this is cool because it's like it reminds me a lot of like this scene reminds me a lot of Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. It has that kind of vibe with the whole computer tech with the forming the symbols. Like that was pretty cool.
Whenever it appears, he appears.
I'd like to note that the Druids, the pagans, the festival of Samhain, and the ritualistic sacrifice of crops and animals during the festival are based on real life, while the cult of Thorn and the Thorn constellation are not, but the name Thorn is based off of a letter in the Old English alphabet. It looks kind of like a P and a B put together, so they made the movie version just look a little bit more thorny. The Thorn constellation in the Halloween movies appears in the sky at seemingly random intervals. They're just the same years that the Halloween movies came out. Its first appearance in Michael's lifetime comes in 1963, and this is the night that Dr. Wynn and his cult place the curse on the young boy, forever changing his behavior and making him an empty, soulless killing machine. In my Things You Missed episode on Halloween 1978, I talked about how Michael's actions that night could be interpreted as representing a release of psychosexual trauma that Michael was too young to understand. I went in depth with the psychological interpretation on that video because it doesn't fall in line with the information presented in Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. So in this video, since we're analyzing his entire character, that psychological interpretation doesn't make sense. Michael is simply possessed by the cult. Michael Myers' power is described by Dr. Wynn as something greater than a man driven to commit crimes.
Evil, pure, uncorrupted, ancient.
On October 31st, 1963, Michael's parents go out for the evening, and his older sister is hanging out with her boyfriend. So he's left in the care of an older woman named Mrs. Blankenship across the street. He begins to hear a voice in his head. Presumably, this was the voice of Dr. Wynn, or possibly the demon Thorn itself.
Michael heard a voice. It told him to kill his family.
And that's exactly what he does. He grabs a knife and goes to take out his sister by stabbing her several times, before his parents eventually come home to discover what he had done. Michael is sentenced to Smiths Grove Sanitarium and assigned to a doctor named Samuel Loomis. In a hearing 6 months later, in April 1964, Loomis was instructed to report on Michael's progress to the court 2 times a year.
Further, Michael Audrey Myers shall be brought before the court on the day of his 21st birthday, where he shall be tried as an adult.
Michael was seemingly in a catatonic state, causing nearly everyone to see him as harmless other than Dr. Loomis. His initial stay at Smiths Grove lasted 15 years, none of which is documented in the Halloween films. However, the non-canon Chaos Comics material tells of Michael's involvement in more murders. These stories occasionally contradict the canon, but they were written to go in tandem with Michael's original story, so no, they don't technically count as part of his history, but let's go over them briefly. Michael was sent to Rome with a number of male patients, one of which was a psychopath named Tony O'Malley, who got into a scuffle with Michael one night before bed and had to be separated by a security guard. He was put off by Michael's non-speaking nature and plans to attack him in his sleep, but Michael was not asleep and shoved a crayon, or depending on where you're from, a crayon, into Tony's left eye. Tony was actually one of the few Michael victims to survive, but the crayon, or crayon, pressed up against his brain, causing him to become more delusional and violent, landing him in a padded cell for solitary confinement. In November 1964, a juvenile named Adrian Wade, who suffered from an obsessive eating disorder, ate a cake that was intended for Michael. So Michael trapped him in the showers and tortured him with scalding hot water. He was found unconscious with multiple burns and later died in the hospital wing with heart failure. Years would go by without incident, and most of the staff considered Michael a model patient. But then, in 1971, another young patient, a self-harmer named Roger, who claimed to have witnessed Michael's attack on Tony O'Malley, was found after supposedly biting off his own tongue and choking him. If you're familiar with Michael, you can probably assume that that's not how things really went down. That Halloween, one of the asylum's administrators decided to put on a Halloween party for the kids, and Michael wore a clown costume. The same costume he wore when he jabbed Judith in 1963. A girl named Nancy teased Michael for having cooties. During a game of bobbing for apples, lightning struck the building, causing the power to go out. And in the cover of darkness, Michael drowned her and disappeared before the lights came back up. When Loomis discovers what happened, he's furious, frustrated by his patient's continued silence, and nearly strikes the boy before being stopped by his fiancée, Jennifer. Jennifer mentions that she believes Michael belongs in a prison, which Michael seems to hear, and he decides to make her his next target. He throws her off the roof of the building, and it is ruled that she made the jump by herself. What do all of these Chaos Comics victims have in common? They all did something that Michael didn't like. Whether it's aggression, stolen food, accusations, general teasing, or wishing ill on him, all of these characters suffer from a form of revenge. In the Cult of Thorn arc, that's not how Michael operates. He's driven by a supernatural evil that tells him what to do, and he has one goal, which we'll talk about later. That's part of why the comics are not considered canon, so let's get back to what is canon. The original Rampage that would take place on Halloween night in October 1978.
Because if you look at like Michael Myers, like as a character, you can look at it different ways. You know what I'm saying? You can take a look at it, right? Like if you like revenge type of Michael, because that's what it seems like. Like when he showed the books, Michael was like killing people because they were like doing something that, like he said, provokes, like irritates him, you know, stuff like that. And you can run with that, you know. But in the original Halloween, you can look at it because like Michael reacted to what's her name? Annie. Yeah, Annie. Annie says speed kills, and he responded by stopping the car. Therefore, that's why he went after her and killed her. You can look at it like that, you know. Maybe um, um, when no, the other girl and the guy were having sex, like you probably like trigger him like to kill because you're reminding of Judith. I don't know. You can look at it different ways, interpret it different ways. That's what's so great about Halloween is like you can interpret Michael different ways. And if you're gonna follow canons like the original timeline, the H2O timeline, like you can pick and choose, man, like what um, type of character Michael is. Like you don't have to believe that he's not like the reason why he is because of Cold Thorn. You don't have to go that route. You can pick the H2O route and say like, oh no, there's Cold Thorn nothing to do with it, something else. Or you can go the reboot route with the Blumhouse and say, oh yeah, this is something different. Like there's different ways to interpret um, Michael's intent. Because they're movies. There's different timelines. So it's like pick your choose. Like they always say, pick. It's like choose your own adventure type of shit. Let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, no one's in chat yet. All right, let's continue. In the whole revenge type of Michael thing, or like he said, before we continue, the whole revenge Michael type of thing, you know, that's very like similar. Oh, sorry, my thing's running out. It's very similar to um, the one like slasher movie that was set in the camp with the girl. She was killing people in act of revenge. That's what it seems like. Um, but like I said, man, you can choose. It's pick you choose your own adventure. You can decide whether Michael is a demon from Cult of Thorn, or he's just this evil guy, that just becomes evil out of nowhere, like in the H2O and all that. So yeah. By the way, guys, I can talk about horror all day, every day. Like I'm probably going more than 3 hours, dude. Like I'm not gonna lie. I'll definitely put it in like different. Like I'll clip some things. I'll clip. I'll do clips.
Michael Myers turns 21 years old and so was due back in court to be tried as an adult. Dr. Loomis and nurse Marion Chambers were supposed to transport him to his trial, so Michael took action to make sure that this was not possible. He destroyed his room at Smith's Grove, freed many of his fellow captives, and left behind the word sister in blood, although to most this appeared to be a reference to his older sister Judith, because his younger sister's existence was hidden from the public, and she was given a new name and new family so that she would be protected from any potential harassment. Since Dr. Wynn was the administrator of the sanitarium and also the leader of the Cult of Thorn, it's not hard to imagine that he didn't exactly try his hardest to prevent Michael's escape. Michael waits for Loomis and Chambers to pull up to the sanitarium, and when Loomis gets out to use the nearby phone, he attacks Marion, driving her out of the vehicle, which he takes for himself. I know you can play as Michael Myers in Dead by Daylight, but I think this is proof that he should also be playable in GTA.
Let's go bowling.
Michael's ability to drive without any training or experience has always been a point of question, one that's even brought up in the movie.
Sam Haddonfield is 150 miles away from here. Now, for God's sakes, he can't drive a car.
He was doing very well last night.
When you consider the fact that Michael is no ordinary mental patient, but rather more of a vessel for this ancient evil known as Thorn, this starts to make more sense. Throughout his story, we discover many of the powers granted to him by Thorn, so the ability to operate a car doesn't seem that far-fetched. During his 19-
See, like that makes sense, you know? That makes sense. The fact that the Thorn helped him drive a car, dude, that makes sense. Makes total sense. I'm not exaggerating. Like that's literally, that makes sense. Now then again, if you don't like that, cool. You got the H2O. You got the requel Halloween with Blumhouse. You got that. I think it's cool. Because it makes sense, right? It makes sense and it's pretty interesting.
1978 Rampage, Michael is trying to recreate the experience he had when killing his older sister in 1963. I like to think of it as a ritual that he established when he was 6, going after his older sister, and now he's trying to recreate it, going after his younger sister. When he was 6, he wore a one-piece clown suit and mask, his Halloween costume. So this time, he puts together a similar attire. He runs a mechanic's truck off the road and annihilates him to get the one-piece suit, and when he gets into Haddonfield, he breaks into the general store and steals his now iconic mask in place of the common mask. He also steals some rope, which he would use later. Next, he breaks into his old home, which now sits abandoned. When they later investigate the house, they find a dead dog, which Loomis has his own explanation for.
He got hungry.
Okay, he knows his patient best, so I'm willing to accept that explanation. At this point, his sister Lori stops by the house to leave a key under the mat at the request of her adoptive father, who's a realtor who is trying to sell the place. Michael sees her walk up to the front door and leave the key, but he lets her walk away and stares at her as she makes her way towards her school. Did Michael immediately know that this was his sister, or did Lori become a target simply because he was angry that his old house was being sold? We'll get our answer a little bit later, but for now, we just need to know that Michael is planning to make Lori one of his future victims. I also wondered why he stalks Lori throughout the day instead of just killing her right now. He follows her to school and stares her down through the window during her English class, then, after killing some time skulking around the elementary school, keeps surveillance on Lori and her friends as they walk home from the school. When Annie yells out at him, he even stops and seems to consider killing them all right then and there, but doesn't. So what's the big holdup? Obviously, the real reason is that the movie would only be 22 minutes long if he killed them in daylight, but also, in 1963, Michael was given his curse as part of the Festival of Samhain. And if we go back to the holiday's origins in Celtic Ireland, it was celebrated starting in the evening on October 31st. So if Michael is waiting for nightfall for the sake of tradition, that may also explain what he does next. He stops by the cemetery and steals his sister's tombstone, with plans to use it as a prop during his recreation of her death. Instead of an immediate sibling slice and dice, he just keeps an eye on Lori, staring from behind some hedges, watching her through her bedroom window, and following her and Annie as they head to their babysitting jobs that evening. When they arrive, he waits for them to park and watches them go to their respective jobs. Remember, if you've seen my Things You Missed episode on the original Halloween, you saw me provide a different interpretation for Michael's behavior that afternoon, because I was analyzing the movie as a standalone story. But in this horror history episode, I'm analyzing Michael's entire character, and the context provided by the sequels in this timeline changes how I have to look at him. It's all about the family connection, because Michael has to sacrifice his entire family before being freed by Thorn. Of course, having a massive amount of retroactive continuity like this can kind of mess up the story if you aren't careful, and let's face it, this isn't Saw. Continuity wasn't the biggest concern. So the next thing that Michael does is go after the sex-crazed teens babysitting across the street from the Doyle house where Lori is babysitting. If I'm going to try to slap on a reasoning for his actions here, the Curse of Thorn is what's telling Michael what to do, and Thorn likes human sacrifice. So any extra victims that Michael can decease along the way are bonus points, even if they aren't a part of Michael's family. It's like how I might go out to get a steak taco, but once I see the menu, I'm probably going to add the nachos, cinnamon twist, horchata, and probably like 3 additional steak tacos if we're being real. The way Michael goes after his victims can only be
Good
described with one
example.
word: unsettled. Everything he does is very methodical, from his slow walking to his empty staring into space to his complete silence as he does it all. This creates the impression that he's essentially a blank slate, void of character, almost like a machine programmed by the curse that's been placed on him. This not only fits the idea of the character essentially being a shape that does these things without interjecting any personality, but also taps into elements that the human mind perceives as unsettling. The core reason that people can easily be off-put by the idea of voyeurism goes back to basic survival instincts. When humans lived in the wild, if another lurking animal had eyes on them, it was most likely a predator getting ready to strike. So we're genetically predisposed.
You know, it'd be crazy if in the Blumhouse trilogy they reveal Michael as like a robot. Imagine, imagine. Oh man.
To be uncomfortable in these situations and avoid them. One of the first studies on the sensation of being watched was called The Feeling of Being Stared At, a title almost as fitting to its content as the title of that one 80s movie with the blob, which was called The Blob. The article's author, Dr. Edward Titchener, disproves the idea that someone's gaze itself could be what gives you those goosebumps. That unsettled feeling you get is something that you give yourself. In fact, an actual voyeur isn't even necessary. You can get creeped out just by believing that you're being watched. Michael takes advantage of this by popping in, being seen by the victim he's stalking, and then disappearing, leaving his target to wonder if he's still somewhere nearby, zeroing in on them with that piercing stare.
Lori, the boogeyman's outside, look!
Tommy, there's nobody outside.
But it would not be long before Michael Myers' apparent voyeurism would escalate into much more dangerous behavior.
All right. Sounds good.
Michael's night continues as he focuses on Laurie's friend Annie, who's babysitting at the Wallace house across the street. He starts by locking her in the laundry room, then after she gets out, he eavesdrops as she makes evening plans with her boyfriend. And by evening plans, I mean sex. Michael hides inside of her car. She drops off the little girl Lindsay across the street at the Doyle's house, and when she comes back, she hops into the vehicle to go pick up Paul, and he lets her discover that she's not alone before getting down to business. And by business, I mean killing her. He didn't even have the courtesy to phone Paul and let him know that his ride is canceled. He moves Annie's body inside for later use. When he comes back downstairs, he discovers 2 more horny teens have appeared, Linda and her boyfriend Bob, who are getting at it on the couch. After they move things upstairs, Bob heads down to the kitchen for a drink, and Michael surprises him by doing this. He pins Bob to the wall with a butcher's knife, then further conceals his identity by dressing up as a bedsheet ghost, which, I mean, if he wanted to pretend to be Bob in order to trick Linda, he's already in a costume. He's rocking the mask and jumpsuit. But I guess the bedsheet ghost maybe does a better job of concealing his physique because he's much more physically imposing than Bob. Putting Bob's glasses over the ghost costume is enough to convince Linda that that's her boyfriend. And when she turns her back to him to call Laurie, he strangles her with the phone cord. With all 3 of Laurie's friends across the street out of commission, Michael turns out the last remaining lights in the house, much like how the sanitarium went dark before he took out his fellow patient Nancy in 1971. He then arranges the body of Annie in the upstairs bedroom under Judith Meyer's tombstone as a tribute to his first ever attack, and waits for his younger sister to stumble upon it. Linda is stuffed in the closet, and Bob is hung up in the closet with the rope that he stole earlier. Good planning. After discovering this, Laurie stumbles out of the room in a mess of emotions, and Michael emerges from the darkness of the room next door, in what is probably the coolest shot in Halloween. She's chased back across the street and tries to defend herself by sticking a knitting needle through his neck, which does cause him to drop to the floor for some time. If you're watching this video, you probably already know that Michael Myers is invincible, and this is a result of the powers he acquires by being cursed by the ancient demon Thorn. But at the same time, he isn't just an unstoppable machine. Hurting him enough will put him down for short periods of time, which I refer to as his recharge periods. When he comes back to, he follows Laurie back up the stairs and finds her tending to the kids, but now his focus is on his sister. He finds her hiding in a bedroom closet and busts through. Lights on? No. Lights off. Laurie resourcefully pokes out his eye with a coat hanger, which puts him down long enough for her to get out of the room and get the kids out of the house. Michael gets a quick ab workout in, then comes for her once more, and she's only just able to rip off his mask, which completely shocks him for a moment. This is one of the few times that we see his as an adult, and he looks shocked, almost like the mask is such an important part of this ritual that he can't believe that she's removed it. As he puts it back on, he's shot by someone in the dark and stumbles back into the bedroom. It turns out to be his old psychiatrist, Dr. Linders, who unloads 5 more bullets into him, knocking him off the patio and onto the Doyle's front lawn. But as always, Michael's ailment is only temporary, and he flees the scene to recoup. He hides out in a back alley as the police close in on the Doyles. Now left without a weapon, he goes up to a random residence to restock and arms himself with a carving knife stolen from Mrs. Elrod's cutting board. Then, just to make sure the knife works, I guess, he breaks into the house of their neighbor, Alice, and successfully tests it out on her. I could try to dissect why the Elrods got to live and Alice didn't, but I think it's better not to. Part of what makes this iteration of Michael scary for audiences is his unpredictability. You don't really know when he's going to strike. This must be when Michael broke into his old elementary school and left this clue that would later be found by the It's a childlike drawing of a family on Halloween, potentially Michael's family, with a knife stuck into the system.
Hold on a second.
If I'm interpreting it correctly, which will surely be up for debate, would prove that he did know about Lori and he was targeting her specifically. He also paints the word Samhain onto the chalkboard as a tribute to his demonic lord Thorn, since the curse of Thorn that has afflicted him all of these years is part of the ritual carried out during the festival of Samhain. It seems like the lesson on the chalkboard may have already been there when Michael arrived, but it's also possible that it's no coincidence, seeing as how it's an astronomy lesson, and the date of each of Michael's homicidal rampages is determined by the alignment of the planets in the solar system. At this point, news of a killer in Haddonfield is spreading all over the media, which at the time meant TVs and radios, and Michael overhears where Lori is being taken from this cowboy's boombox. Yeehaw, Rolex.
There is one survivor. 17-year-old Lori Strode was found directly across the street from the home where the murders took place. The teenager was taken across town to Haddonfield Memorial Clinic.
He must have been getting close to Michael's bedtime or something, because after hearing this, he just lets the next 17 teenagers he crosses paths with go free. Seriously, I counted. He just goes straight to the hospital and dumps out the rest of his cherry Slurpee in the dumpster. He promptly heads downstairs to hide in the nursery, before continuing on to the storeroom where he's able to slash through the phone lines, effectively isolating Lori and the hospital staff from calling in outside help. One by one, he takes out each of the staff members at the hospital taking care of Lori, starting with the security guard, Mr. Garrett, who gets tomahawked with the pointy end of a hammer, and then an EMT named Bud gets choked from behind after making love to his girlfriend Karen in a hydrotherapy bath. After doing so, he cranks up the heat of the bath to over 130 degrees Fahrenheit in preparation of his next kill.
Alright. Cool. Hold on a second. Alright.
Is to die, and this is a combination of both. In
It
fact,
is.
if you look at the top 10s, which is a website that lets the internet vote on ranking things, people have agreed that burning to death and drowning would be the two worst ways to go. Of course, we'll never know for sure, seeing as how everyone who participated in this poll was still alive, but you get the idea. On top of that, I can only imagine the stark terror that Karen felt, because she thought she was in the safe, protective hands of her boyfriend, and she turns around to realize that it's actually this terrifying masked man. She's also undressed, so add a feeling of vulnerability to the equation, and this is just not your ideal way to spend your final moments. It seems like Michael just wants to clear out anyone who could pose as an obstacle to him getting the Lori. And the next person in his way was most likely Nurse Virginia Alves. Michael catches her in one of the surgery rooms and ties her down to an operating table, then hooks her up to a severed IV catheter so she's unable to move as her blood slowly drains out of her body. He continues to the office of Dr. Frederick Mixter, who prescribes him with 20 cc's of medication injected directly in his right eye. Then, when Nurse Janet Marshall comes to check on him, Michael appears out of the dark and jabs the blood vessel in her temple with an air-filled syringe, which essentially creates an air bubble in your bloodstream and stops the flow of blood to the brain, which is usually lethal. It seems his very straightforward and methodical way of going about things doesn't hold him back from getting creative with some of his kills. With all of the staff that regularly walk the corridors of the main lobby, either dead or trying to find help, Michael has free reign to slow walk his way right into Laurie's room uncontested. Now armed with the surgical scalpel, he sees his target apparently unconscious due to the medication that she's on and decides to get to stealth. When he realizes she's not there, he looks to the security monitors to find her and heads in her direction. But first, he comes across a conversation between the last two remaining hospital employees, a nurse named Jill Franco and an ambulance attendant named Jimmy. He overhears Jimmy instruct her to drive to the sheriff's station for help if she doesn't find anyone in the East Wing, so while she's searching the other side of the building, Michael goes out to the parking lot and disables all of the vehicles by stabbing their tires and cutting their fuel lines. As Jill comes back in, Michael hears her calling out Laurie's name and goes towards the sound. Just before she realizes he's there, he drives the scalpel into her back so hard that he's able to lift her off from the ground, with a small blade holding up her entire weight. This is where another one of the abilities that the curse has granted him starts to become clear. In addition to being immortal, he's also acquired superhuman strength. With one more staff member out of the way and his main target finally in his line of sight again, he goes after her, but his refusal to walk anywhere near a normal pace doesn't do him any favors, and Laurie gets away in an elevator. However, it's not long before Michael catches her outside. How about that? He's almost able to reach her before someone lets her back into the building. Michael just crashes through the door like a deer in a hair salon. And sees Dr. Loomis and Nurse Chambers trying to protect Laurie. His old psychiatrist is armed and ready and shoots him 5 more times, bringing the grand total to 11 on the night. As we've seen to be the case whenever Michael is attacked, he collapses temporarily, but cannot die. The state marshal that came with Dr. Loomis goes in for a closer look, stupidly assuming that Michael had stopped breathing, and Michael springs to life and slits his throat. Loomis and Laurie retreat to another operating room, so Michael busts down that door too, bringing him within striking distance of his doctor. Loomis's gun jams, and Michael takes the opportunity to stab him in the gut. When he corners Laurie, she fires a couple shots at him, which apparently lands just above his eyes, I guess. Judging by the fact that the mask doesn't have any bullet holes, the drip down from his wounds temporarily blinds him, and rather than just using his hearing to try to locate her, he just kind of flails around the room in the general direction where he thinks that she might be for some reason. Laurie is audibly whimpering too, so it should have been kind of easy. Not one of Michael's finer moments. Somehow, though, he is able to hear the hissing sound of the gas tanks opened by Loomis near the front of the room, but before long, the sound surrounds him. The last thing he hears is the voice of his psychiatrist.
It's time, Michael.
This is easily the biggest blast that Mr. Myers has yet to endure. With the mechanics of his invincibility and recharge period still mostly a mystery, I can only assume that it was his sheer willpower and determination that kept him going. Because he knew he was so close to finishing his sister off. He was able to force himself to go a little bit longer before collapsing again, as he had when suffering would-be fatal blows in the past. So to Laurie's absolute horror, Michael actually walks out of the blaze, literally covered in burning flames, before finally his body can take him no further and he falls face forward, where he would continue to burn until the fire department arrived and found him in a coma, this time a much more permanent one, as he would spend the next 10 years in this comatose state. This time, instead of being taken back to Smith's Grove, Michael was locked up in a higher security facility known as Ridgemont Federal Sanitarium, where despite being a vegetable for his entire stay, he gained a reputation for being the devil himself, and even the guards were afraid of him. As for the room that he's locked in,
Welcome to hell.
after 10 years of being in a coma, it doesn't look like Michael is ever going to come out of it, and it was decided that he should be moved back to Smith's Grove to open up space for other, more threatening patients. Dr. Loomis is still Michael's doctor during this time, though it's said that the position is more ceremonial. Many of the day-to-day decisions fall on the Ridgemont medical administrator, Dr. Hoffman. Michael was to be transferred on October 30th, 1988, one day shy of the 10-year anniversary of his rampage. Extra precautions are taken to ensure a smooth operation. However, disaster strikes when the ride to Smith's Grove doesn't quite go as planned. During Michael Myers' original stay at Smith's Grove Sanitarium, he was assumed to be relatively harmless as more and more time passed. He was relatively catatonic, and only Dr. Loomis was able to see through him and understand that the patient was still dangerous. case. It seems that Michael employed a similar tactic at Ridgemont, because while it's assumed that he's still comatose during his patient transfer, he is secretly awake and conscious to hear the transfer personnel discussing his living relatives.
Hoffman say anything about living relatives?
Yeah, the niece living in his hometown.
Clearly, Michael is sentient during this ambulance ride. It would be hard to say for sure how long he's been awake before this, but given how he tricked most of the sanitarium staff as a kid, I wouldn't be surprised if he was faking his coma for the last couple years now. The information about who his living relative is also important, because of the curse of Thorn. Even if Laurie wasn't around anymore, he still has to take out the rest of his family in order to spare the community at large. Once he hears what he needs to hear, Myers breaks free and demonstrates his unbelievable strength by shoving his thumb through the man's forehead into his skull. They make it just south of Mill Creek, about 4 hours outside of Haddonfield, before the ambulance crashes, probably the result of Michael attacking the driver. It ends up flipped over in a river. Talk about rolling the ambulance. But that wasn't even the end of the suffering for at least one of the passengers. We can actually see carnage smeared all over the outside of the vehicle, which would suggest that one of the transfer personnel actually survived and may have tried to escape the crash site, only to be reeled back in and gutted by Michael Myers. Since his signature mask and jumpsuit burned up in the fire in 1978, Michael feels the need to get back in costume and stops at the local auto shop called Penny's Garage. Here he finds a stake and uses it to impale the mechanic and take his jumpsuit. He ends up hanging the guy up in chains in the back of his tow truck. It seems that Michael likes to make a spectacle of his victim, whether that be the Shrine of Babysitters in 1978, the unique cause of death for each of the hospital staff, the capsized ambulance, or now the strung-up mechanic. This, like many of his actions, may go back to Thorn. Perhaps Michael wants to show off his work to gain favor with the ancient being. Or maybe he just does this to intimidate the survivors as much as possible, because he enjoys it. He goes to a small diner attached to the garage and relieves the waitress of her duties. By the looks of it, this one died of strangulation. If you don't like the service, you don't have to leave a tip, but damn. He also destroys all of the telephones, a tactic that worked well to buy him some time before the authorities showed up at the hospital in 1978, so why not try it again here? It would seem that he's looking for his next victim inside the kitchen when he's confronted by his old friend, Dr. Loomis. His doctor tries to slow him down with another round of lead, but this time he gets out of the way and tries to strand Loomis at the garage by stealing a tow truck and using it to sideswipe the gas pump to blow up Loomis's car. Now that he's got a suit and vehicle, the next item on his list is getting a mask, and he's able to find one at Vincent Drug in Haddonfield. Actually, the one he gets looks like a cheap knockoff of the one he had, which makes sense because his actions 10 years ago made the mask more popular, so they probably had to be mass-produced at lower quality. He also has a chance encounter with his niece, Jamie Lloyd, the living relative that he heard about earlier. But like he did with Laurie in the past, he waits until nightfall to come after her. He stalks the house that evening, and after Jamie and her adopted sister Rachel head out for trick-or-treating, he does a little investigating and confirms Jamie's relationship to Laurie Strode. He also gets his stabbing hand warmed up on Rachel and Jamie's dog because he's an adult. We know in previous situations that Michael has thrived in the darkness, like the blackout at the sanitarium and his turning off the lights in the Wallace house. This time he goes straight to the source, the power station in Haddonfield, and throws a technician into a transformer, not only electrocuting him, but also causing a blackout in town. He then completely massacres the police station, leaves the place in ruins, and without a police force, save for a couple of stragglers. On a foggy back road, he finds Rachel, who is supposed to be babysitting Jamie that night, and scares her away. At least I assume that's him. It's hard to say for sure with all these imitators running around. Rachel is soon picked up by the police with Jamie in tow. And again, I assume Michael is the one who sticks around to see where they head. However, the car disappears out of his sight. He breaks into a different police car, which is stationed at Jamie's house, and hides in the back seat in order to catch a free ride to wherever they're going. Although the house is supposedly locked down, Michael still finds a way in somehow, and eyes his next target, Deputy Logan, who is in charge of guarding the front door. Once Loomis and Sheriff Meeker leave the house, he makes his move, literally tearing his head and hand from his body. Michael takes a page from his murder of Bob Sims and Linda Vanderklok the decade before by pretending to be someone else. He sits in Logan's rocking chair until the sheriff's daughter, Kelly Meeker, comes along, and in another similarity to the Bob Sims kill, he impales her body against the door, this time using Deputy Logan's rifle to do so. That leaves two more human obstacles in the house for Michael to get through before reaching Jamie. Rachel and her love interest, Brady. Michael finds them on the stairs, and Brady tries to fight him physically, but is easily no match. Michael lifts him up and crushes his neck and skull with his bare hand. He conveniently finds another carving knife in the loft and comes after Rachel and Jamie with it onto the roof of the house, where he narrowly misses, turning the elder of the two into a rooftop Halloween decoration. He eventually knocks her down onto the lawn, where she falls unconscious, but Jamie is able to escape. However, Michael hears the security alarm going off at the elementary school and decides to search there for her. Suddenly, having blonde hair for some reason, he ambushes Dr. Loomis and throws him out of the way, and he goes flying through the door like a Doberman through a coffee table. Michael, after quickly popping into the bathroom to dye his hair back to normal, appears on the stairs behind Jamie, and he's actually able to grab her after she falls down the steps and is unable to get back on her feet. However, Rachel saves her when she shows up to blind Michael with the fire extinguisher sprayed in his face. If Malcolm in the Middle is to be believed, this could actually work. However, as per usual with Michael Myers, his blindness is only temporary. And he's actually able to sneak past everybody and latch himself onto the bottom.
Yo, yo, yo. Okay, cool, cool, cool. That was a good episode on the original Michael Myers timeline. Okay. I mean, hey man, it's don't get me wrong, like I enjoy not knowing what Michael is and what he does, but it's pretty unique, storyline with the Cola Thorn. So hey, it is what it is. Let's see, what else did they got? I think they also do the other Halloween timelines. So they did the original. Huh? Hey, that shit's right there. Um, yeah, because he did the original timeline. He does like the shoot, just different timelines for the characters. So he didn't do H2O timeline. He did the Snare franchise. Chucky timeline. We can do okay. We can try to do that original timeline. Um, it's crazy. Timeline 1, 2, and timeline 3. So when it comes to the Annabelle demon, um, Annabelle is not creepy or scary to me from a from a doll. Obviously, it's been either inhabited or by this other demon, but I don't know, man. Rowlack from the Nun. Jigsaw. We can do Jigsaw. The Ferryman from Conjuring. Yeah, there's a lot of Conjuring shit. Let's do. Oh shit, we went out too much. Oh no, we didn't. Let's do. What was the one? Chucky? You guys want to do Chucky? Because there's like stories that I want to understand. You know what I'm saying? Like with Chucky, I understand the story and the timeline. Like I understand that. Like I had no problem. There's just something like the Halloween original timeline. Like that one I need to know. You know what I'm saying? Um, Dr. Lewis. Let's just go do the. Let's see what else he has. Shout out to CZsWorld, man. He has over 1.8 million subs, dude. That's fucking awesome. Fuck. I'm not gonna watch like the history of like the Annabelle demon. Like I haven't seen those. Okay, so we might talk about the Mind Flayer. Because there's something about the Mind Flayer that I don't really know about. I have seen The Conjuring, the devil made you do it. Damn, man. Mhm. It's crazy. Okay, see, like,
Clorox disinfecting mist. Aerosol-free and kills 99.9% of germs on hundreds of surfaces.
Who you call germy? Oh boy! Ooh, behind the ear.
This should be good.
Isla Kastner, also known as the occultist, was born in 1932 to Father Kastner, a priest in Brookfield, Connecticut. We know this based on Father Kastner's photo album that he shows to Lorraine Warren. Not much is known about Isla's mother, except for the fact that she died during childbirth. This led Father Kastner to make the decision to raise Isla in secrecy in an old mill at the edge of town, where the church wouldn't find her. He made this choice because, understandably, the church would probably have a lot of questions about how a priest, who took a vow of celibacy, suddenly has a biological child. And I think claiming immaculate conception was probably out of the question. Though I do kind of wonder why he wouldn't just claim that he found the baby and offered to take her in. It's not like paternity tests were common in 1932, but maybe it still would have looked suspicious if they looked alike. Secret romantic affairs were not Father Kastner's only hobby. He became obsessed with the occult, and for much of Isla's childhood, she witnessed her dad studying Satanists to try to stop them from spreading their evil. His interest in studying the occult, combined with Isla's confinements to where those occult objects were kept, ended up creating a perfect storm that led to Isla becoming the exact type of Satanist that Father Kastner feared. To find out how Isla became an occultist who dedicated her life to an evil curse, stick around to the end of this video. This video is sponsored by Audible. Welcome to Horror History. In this lesson, I'll be covering the life, atrocities, and death of Brookfield, Connecticut's most deadly Satanist, Isla Kastner, or as I sometimes call her, the malnourished lady. Before Isla's birth, the church had been using an old mill by the river just outside Brookfield, Connecticut for storage. As Father Kastner put it, it's where they put the things that they were afraid of, things they didn't understand. Leaning into the metaphor, he thought this would be the best place to raise his illegitimate daughter in secret. When I say it out loud, it kind of makes sense that Isla turned out the way that she did. Since Father Kastner raised Isla in secret, it's safe to assume that she was homeschooled and wouldn't have been allowed to have any friends, except for maybe her dog, Petey. Either way, Isla couldn't have had much socialization with other kids or anyone besides her dad. While Father Kastner didn't seem to think this was a problem,
It's just the two of us. Our happiness filled this house.
Isla seemed to have a different opinion. Having to be hidden away from the world in shame, along with her father's obsession with Satanism, made for a deadly combination as Isla grew up with a thirst to get back at the world that she had been shunned from. In order to understand the deadly curse that she dedicated herself to, we'll need to take it back to before she was even born. When cults are mentioned in the mainstream lexicon, they're usually associated with the 1970s. This is because some of the most infamous and destructive cults were brought to light during that decade, one of the most prominent being Charles Manson and his followers.
You feel blame? Are you mad? Do you feel like Wolf's Kebab's referendums? Get friends,
However, cults have been feared by civilians for centuries before this. According to Penn State humanities professor Philip Jenkins, there are cults on record that date back as far as the late 1800s. However,
hold on, we gotta watch some freaking Charles Manson reviews. Not right now.
It wasn't until the early 1930s when the earliest recorded anti-cult movements began. As new political and religious groups started to form, there was a backlash, and many of these groups were speculated to be cults of Satanists who promoted devil worship. The media of the 1920s really ran with this idea, and both the Christian and Catholic sects of the church found these groups to be particularly threatening. So this is where Father Kastner's concern about these cults started. Even prior to Isla's birth, he was likely spending a lot of time at the mill as he studied these groups. After Isla's birth in 1932, she grew up in isolation. Instead of doing the things that a kid would normally do, like play with other children or eat food, Isla explored the tunnels below the mill, becoming very familiar with them. Meanwhile, at home, her father's office was littered with cursed items from different Satanists that the church had investigated. Even if Father Kastner had tried to keep Isla out of his office where these items resided, she inevitably would have still found her way in to explore, just as Judy Warren later did at Ed and Lorraine's locked room of cursed items.
Honey, what are you doing? Come here. You know better.
Like Judy, Isla would have been curious about what her father was spending most of his time doing and about the unique items that filled his study. The difference is that growing up, Judy had 3 adults to look after her. Isla had 1. Where Judy had other outlets to be a normal kid, like roller skating with her babysitter or raising the chickens, Isla really only had her father and his obsessions. As Father Kastner would later state himself,
I continued my studies into the occult. I wanted to protect her from all this. Instead, I created a fascination.
As the anti-cult scare of the 1940s started to die down, Isla entered her late teens and early 20s. I would credit Isla's virtual isolation as a child leading her into a life of rebellion and desire to break away from her father. I mean, plenty of teenagers try to rebel against their parents and form their own identity without having been confined to a secret hidden life. But where most young adults leave home to form their own identity by going to college, joining the army, dating some lunatic their parents don't approve of, dyeing their hair some ugly color, getting tattoos, or even subscribing to CZsWorld, Isla took what she had become most familiar with, the occult, and ran with it. Isla's life from 21 to 49 years old is left mostly unknown. Father Kastner implies that she disappeared, stating,
"After all these years, I thought she'd come back to me again."
In the last documented photo of her, she's 20 years old in 1952. Because it's the last photo, she must have disappeared around that time. Prior to her disappearance, Father Kastner describes her fascination with the satanic information he had been studying, so it's likely that she followed one of the many occult groups that she learned through the texts and cursed items in her dad's office. There were many to choose from, so it's tough to say with certainty which one she would have chosen. However, based on what the Warrens and Father Kastner learn about what Isla had been working on, it's possible that she didn't go very far away at all. The Conjuring films are based on the case files of the so-called demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren. The couple had a long literary career before ever being featured in The Conjuring. If you want to dig deeper into their paranormal adventures, the best place to start is with Audible. Audible is the exclusive carrier of the Warrens' 6 audiobook set detailing stories not told in the film. Audible offers an incredible selection of audiobooks across every genre, including horror. You'll also discover exclusive Audible originals from top celebrities, renowned experts, and exciting new voices in audio. Members get a free title every month for keeps. Plus, there's a great selection of free podcasts. This month, I'm listening to Salem's Lot, the Stephen King vampire story that I haven't read since middle school, so it's almost like I'm reading it for the first time. To try out Audible Premium Plus, free for 30 days, visit audible.com/CZsWorld or text CZsWorld to 500-500. You'll find that link in the description, audible.com/CZsWorld.
Yeah. So I seen this movie, and I like what they did with it when it comes to the possession element. Because we're so, in the Conjuring films, we're so used to the possessions. Obviously, in this film, it's been presented as a possession, but it's not. It's actually like it's a curse type of shit. And the woman that's the head, it dies in the cult shit. So you find it out later in the movie. So if you guys didn't know, spoiler alert. 'Cause that's what it is.
Father Kastner's.
And if you guys like the Conjuring movies. You guys, um, you'll like the Nun and La Llorona and all that stuff. Because they're all part of the universe of the Conjuring. Um, it's pretty cool because it's like a universe, you know.
Was part of when she and her boyfriend butchered her adoptive parents and attempted to kill the neighbors under the control of the demon Malthus. If you want to know more about Malthus, check out my horror history episode on
See, I don't know
it goes
nothing
into
about
more
that.
detail. But
See,
did Isla join the disciples of Ram or just take influence from them? To answer this, we'll need to look at the timeline. From what we see in Annabelle, the cult has gained enough notoriety to become a concern to the general public around 1966, when Annabelle Higgins left her family and, similar to Isla, disappeared. Isla left home in 1952.
see, like I don't know anything about the Annabelle story, you know. So, like, I'm not caught up on the whole universe of The Conjuring. I only seen the Conjuring film, mainly The Conjuring Devil, the Devil, maybe do it, whatever it's called. Um, yeah, I gotta watch the other films to like understand what's happening.
So it's unlikely that she would have joined this specific group, because Father Kastner probably didn't start studying them until the 1960s. Plus, the demon that Isla summons later is definitely not Malthus, but we'll get to that. Isla really could have traveled anywhere to investigate any of the occult items or groups that her father was so afraid of. But it's also very likely that she was living in the tunnels below the mill for the last few decades. It would at least explain why she looked so malnourished and pale. Throughout the 1970s, assuming that she had access to any newspapers, radio, or television, she would have witnessed her dad's fears come to fruition, as some of the most destructive cults were revealed. The Charles Manson family was caught in 1969, and the Jonestown Massacre occurred in 1978. These cults may not have been satanic cults, at least not directly, but regardless, concerned mothers and perhaps unintentionally the Beatles amped up a nationwide panic that Father Kastner had dedicated himself to preventing. All of this set the scene for the 1980s.
Get loose! You gotta be loose!
Finally, champions on this January day.
To describe this story as horrifying would be an understatement.
Satanism, devil worship, is being practiced all across the country.
Devil worship, exposing Satan's underground.
To some, it's a religion. To others, it's the practice of evil in the devil's name. It exists, and it's flourishing.
There's another attack upon our society.
Yes, there's a vast movement toward the occult within the cartoon and toy industry.
Those represent the horns of Baphomet or the horns of Satan. How could this happen to a nice boy from a good Catholic school and a fine middle-class family? Is it the church's position that demonic possession is possible? It certainly is.
The Satanic Panic of the 1980s was basically a repeat of the anti-cult scare of the 1940s. The event that really marks the beginning of the Satanic Panic was a book called Michelle Remembers, which was written by Canadian psychologist Lawrence Pazder with his patient and then later wife, two titles that should probably not go together, Michelle Smith, about her scarring childhood memories in a satanic cult. While the validity of this book has since been debated, it was widely popular and sparked a media frenzy, fanning fears and sparking many allegations of Satanism. If Isla had any access to the media at all during this time, she would have been exposed to this moral panic, which was directly associated with the church. Due to her position, Isla already had it ingrained to associate the church with shame and resentment. According to the New York Times, early in the 1980s, baseless conspiracy theories about cults committing crimes against children spread around the country. The way that Father Kastner speaks about the disciples of Ram alludes to this phenomenon.
They defiled holy land with their obscene rituals, and they committed acts of blasphemy.
With years of built-up resentment towards her father and the world around her, this outbreak of alleged satanic activity gave Isla the motivation to act on her occult findings in her late 40s. She discovered a curse from a section of witchcraft called the Stregheria. The Stregheria is a practice of witchcraft originating in northern Italy. It was a modernized paganism, and most of the incantations or spells aimed for a bountiful harvest season or wishing for a loved one to return home safely from travel. But Isla...
See, I like the Conjuring 3 because, and I know there are people who don't like it. said it's their least favorite Conjuring film. I could understand from just the scare factor and the possession type of shit. But what I love about Conjuring 3 is that it literally expands on more of the human side of the evil of humans and how they influence through satanic worshiping. And it was pretty cool, you know. It was pretty cool. You know, there's scenes where like the girl the Isla is like possessing like dead bodies and like trying to attack the Warrens and shit. Like that's fucking cool, you know. So I didn't have a problem with it. I enjoyed it.
Found a much more specific and darker curse.
My Latin is rusty, but I think this is talking about a human sacrifice.
One by murder and the other by suicide.
Whether Isla really did leave home to discover the Stregoria, or if it was one of the many texts in her father's study, she figured out how to perform this curse and put it into action in May of 1981, just before she was set to turn 50 years old. Isla built a large stone altar in the tunnels under the mill, which I have to admit is really impressive considering it looks pretty heavy, and she probably only weighs about 40 pounds herself. On the altar, she carved a pentagram and lined it with black candles. Through this curse, Isla could perform a ritual at the altar, allowing her to take possession of other people. She lights the candles around the pentagram with a chalice in the middle, then cracks an egg into it and lights it on fire before drinking from it. It's probably the most protein she got the entire month. The curse requires Isla to connect to the subject that she wants to control in order to offer their soul to the demon that she summoned. She does this by putting a physical witch's totem in that person's possession or on their property. Isla makes her own totems out of the jaws of animals and other natural materials. I'm guessing she got the animal skulls from livestock in the area, and this may also explain where she's been getting food from and where she got the eggs for her ritual. It's not exactly clear how or why Isla chooses her specific victims. We can only assume that she surveyed the people of Brookfield and chose those who fit the profile needed for the curse to work. We eventually learned that this curse requires a human sacrifice, one by murder and one by suicide. So she targets a pair of unsuspecting college students, Jessica Strong and Katie Lincoln. Isla could have hidden the totem somewhere in Jessica's dwelling at the college, or she might have...
So that's how it connects the main story with the Warrens and the family to those two college people that that one of them killed that college girl. Okay, that's how they're connected. That's how they're connected. Okay. Because in the movie, I was confused. I was like, what does this got to do with the main story? And I think I kind of got it, but I wasn't too sure. So, yeah, this makes sense.
Tricked her and given it to her directly. Whatever the case may be, Jessica must have thought her totem was something interesting rather than a dangerous witch artifact, because she brought it home with her to Danvers, Massachusetts, unintentionally allowing Isla to take control.
Yeah, so that makes sense, because she took it and then she went somewhere else.
Over her.
Interesting.
It's the Brick or Treat Monster Party at Level Resort. Stop your tickets now. And check out the great Monster Chase in 4D, all new and only at Lego Land.
After placing the curse on Jessica Strong, Isla was able to see everything she was doing. Late one night, Jessica brings her friend Katie Lincoln to explore the forest, and with the two isolated from any spectators, Isla took control of Jessica and proceeded to stab Katie to death. When Jessica came to and realized what she had done, she ran away in a panic in the dark, leading her straight off the side of a cliff where she fell to her death. Technically, the murder and the suicide had been fulfilled. The next part of the curse involved the sacrifices of 3 more people: the child, the lover, and the man of God.
That's crazy, man, because like when she stabbed her, and then she ran off the cliff. I thought she survived, but she died. So it's kind of fucking trippy because it's like she didn't mean to kill herself, but it's still counted as a suicide. That's fucking crazy.
First, she would go after the child, which brought her to the Glatzel family, who had a young son, 8-year-old David Glatzel, and were in the process of moving into their new home in May of 1981. Before they even began moving in, she placed a totem under the house directly below the child's bedroom. David started to exhibit strange behavior and signs of possession. So, as we've seen many...
So that's how the movie starts. It's supposed to be like a possession, but it's not.
times in the controversy, the Catholic Church soon got involved, and the paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren were called in to help. They were able to get the approval of the church to send a priest to perform an exorcism on David. On the night of July 18th, 1981, Father Gordon came to perform the
That was a good callback to the original Exorcist, by the way.
exorcism with the assistance of Ed and Lorraine. Only in this case, the exorcism got way out of hand and ultimately was not successful, thanks in some part to the visions that Lorraine had connecting her to the tunnel where Isla was performing the ritual from. These visions seem to cause physical pain to Lorraine, and ultimately, young David, whose demonic possession is being channeled through Isla, breaks free and attacks Ed. In an effort out of desperation, the boyfriend of David's sister, Arnie Johnson, willingly offered his soul to the demon in an attempt to save David.
Leave him alone! It's his name!
Since Arnie was connected to both David and his sister Debbie Glatzel, taking control of him would grant access to the child and the lover. Arnie and his girlfriend are in love and constantly expressing physical affection prior to Arnie's possession. Because he willingly offered his soul, Isla wouldn't need to place a new totem in order to possess him. The evil goes dormant inside of him, so everyone lets their guard down for the time being, believing that the exorcism was a success. However, it would not be long before Arnie would start to notice visions of Isla, who eventually takes full control of Arnie and possesses him to kill his landlord, Bruno. The Warrens figure out that Arnie is still possessed and try to provoke the evil entity inside of him by setting up religious objects, such as the cross, and having him read from the Bible, which he surprisingly does with no problem. However, the Warrens are operating under the assumption that his possession would follow the same rules as previous demonic cases that they had dealt with, like Malthus, who would be averse to holy objects. What they seem to overlook is that it's not actually the demon that's directly taking possession of him. It's Isla herself. That makes this case more similar to the Enfield poltergeist case in 1977, where a girl named Janet Hodgson was possessed by the nun demon Valak, but Lorraine wasn't able to detect Valak because it was using the ghost of an old man as sort of an intermediary. Isla also uses a different tactic at times. When she takes possession of people, she'll give them visions of horrifying creatures threatening them. This leads the possessed people to react by attacking the people around them. Personally, I wonder why she does this so often instead of just taking direct control of her victim, like she did with David. This is one of those cases where the Conjuring lore isn't really that clearly defined, and we have to make our own assumptions. The best guess that I can come up with is that the rules of the curse that she's trying to perform require that her victims carry out the actions themselves. So, for example, when she needs Jessica Strong to end herself, she can't just take control of Jessica and run off the cliff. She has to scare her into running off the cliff on her own. However, she does later attempt to get rid of Arnie by literally just taking control of him and having him slit his own wrists, but maybe that's not part of the curse. Maybe she was giving up on Arnie as a vessel at that point because she didn't like Lorraine being able to see her through her victims. Otherwise, you would think she would have just done that to all of her victims to begin with. Or maybe she just enjoys tormenting her victims and seeing them react. That's the easier but less fun explanation. As I alluded to, when Isla initiates the curse, she didn't anticipate the Warrens' involvement, and their investigation throws a significant wrench into her plans. Ed and Lorraine investigate at the funeral home that Jessica Strong is resting at, where Lorraine, due to her abilities, is able to see through Isla's point of view.
Oh, she has him. She has Arnie. Oh, no.
Oh, God. And this Black Sabbath. By the blood of Calvary, I command this!
Isla is surprised by Lorraine's psychic visions, but doesn't seem too afraid of her.
How are you doing this? God has shown you to me. And your God has damned you.
In addition to possessing living people, Isla can also possess corpses, temporarily giving them life, because apparently she can just do that.
Just like I mentioned before, there was a scene where she possessed this corpse in the morgue and used it to try to attack the Warrens. Glad he brought this up.
That's good to know. As she discovers Lorraine watching her via the psychic connection, she takes control of a big boy in the morgue, sending it to attack. And Ed is able to pull Lorraine out of her vision just in time. If you're interested in the mechanics of this, look at it like this. Lorraine was looking in on Isla by touching her previous victim, Jessica. Now that the connection is formed, Isla can look back at Lorraine, as long as Lorraine is still touching Jessica. And Isla can control other things in the room while the connection is still established. When Lorraine lets go of Jessica, the connection seems to be broken up, and Isla loses control of her big boy and he collapses. The cleaning crew in the morning is going to be really confused. But Isla sees Ed, who is already vulnerable due to his poor health, as a potential tool to get rid of Lorraine. Not only would this leave Isla unopposed, but I imagine that Lorraine could have checked off the box for the lover for her evil ritual, due to Lorraine's unwavering love for her husband. She sends a new totem to the Warrens' house disguised as a bundle of flowers, and her assistant, Drew, unknowingly brings it inside. It's not out of the ordinary for the Warrens to receive gifts from the families that they had helped in the past. This allows Isla to take control of Ed, who also gives her access to see into the Warrens' house and view all of their research. She seems to be taking a particular joy in possessing Ed by taunting him.
Oh, don't worry, Mr. Warren. You're so close. I'd hate for you to give up now.
Once again, using...
See, like, I actually like her as a villain because, you know, she's she's human, right? But, like, she's able to, through, like, witchcraft and, like, shit like that, she's able to go through the supernatural elements, which is cool. And her, like, taunting and, like, doing the shit she does, like, it's cool as fuck.
The tactic of encouraging her victims to do the dirty work by giving them misleading visions, she gives Ed a vision where he's being attacked by the bloated, possessed big boy from the morgue, causing him to grab it.
Right. So the scene where, like, they used the guy from the morgue, and then he's about to stab, I think, his wife. Yeah.
Knife and try to fight back. He is just barely stopped by Drew before actually stabbing his wife. Together, they find the totem and remove Isla's ability to access or control Ed. Isla knows that the Warrens are closing in on her, and they now know how to stop the curse by destroying her altar, if they can find it. So she must enact the end of her curse fast if she wants to succeed. To make matters worse for her, Lorraine goes to Father Kastner for help translating the Stregoria, having no idea that she's so close to Isla in her altar as she does so. Father Kastner also reveals that Isla is his child, and that he is aware of what she's up to, but he couldn't bring himself to turn her in because she was his daughter and he still loved her. I would assume that all of these sentimental feelings are not mutual, however, because as soon as Lorraine leaves, Isla pays her father a little visit.
Rediscover your perfect combination at Pechanga Resort Casino. You're always the star here, with all of the excitement
I was assuming that
you're looking for. So get back to the fun at Pechanga Resort Casino.
I was assuming that she was hiding there and he knew about it.
As Father Kastner prays for forgiveness for his failures as a priest and as a father, he's cut short when Isla coldly slashes his throat, not even giving him the time to utter his final words. This action, whether she planned it or not, fulfills the man of God part of the curse, bringing her one step closer to winning. If she managed to kill Lorraine, no one would be there to stop her from killing a child to satisfy the last requirement of the curse. However, she knows that she's in real trouble, because if Lorraine destroys her altar in time, the whole plan will be broken up. Luckily for Isla, she made her altar out of stone, and Lorraine can't move it on her own. She reaches and attacks Lorraine. Specifically, she tries to stab Lorraine in the eye, both a literal and figurative attack on Lorraine's psychic visions that have been the cause of concern for Isla so far. But it is Lorraine's psychic ability, once again, that saves her, because she's able to see herself through Isla's point of view, and it is only there that she notices the rock that she uses to smash the occultist and break free. When Ed arrives to save and protect Lorraine, Isla once again takes possession of him by blowing dust in his face. It seems like they're just making rules up at this point, but I guess maybe that was like a ground up witch's totem. Who knows at this point? Honestly, let's just roll with it. When Isla takes possession of a person, she works the same way a demon does, in that she can split her attention between the possessed individual and her own self. We saw this in Annabelle Creation, where the horned demon Malthus could terrorize people in one location and the possessed Janus would come after people in the other room. Isla uses this technique to her advantage by sending Ed after Lorraine with a mallet to distract from her, returning to the altar to take control of Arnie one more time. She starts the ritual with Arnie's photo. As he arrives in pain under Isla's possession, she gets him to pick up a shard of glass and hold it to his own throat. Luckily for Arnie, his girlfriend girlfriend holds his arm back, while the priest goes into some prayers to try to rid him of his possession. Meanwhile, as Ed attacks Lorraine, she pleads with him to remember their first kiss.
She tried to turn you against me because she thinks our love is our weakness, but it's not.
These words get through to him, and he's able to regain control of himself and smash Isla's altar, carnival style, breaking the curse and releasing Arnie from Isla's control.
Your curse is broken.
In the end, Lorraine's ability to get through to Ed was fitting. It was supposedly their love that helped them defeat Isla, and she was not able to stop them because she didn't know love. As the illegitimate daughter of a priest, she lived an isolated life, where her only family looked upon her in shame. Although her father may have cared about her, she was blinded by resentment. The malnourished lady was also malnourished from love. But even with her master plan literally having crumbled before her, Isla emerges from the dark with a knife in hand, looking like she's going to use it to take revenge on the paranormal couple that had ruined everything for her. Before getting the chance to do this, the demon she had summoned finally arrives in a corporeal form. It is not clear who this demon is. We only see it in the form of Isla herself. To me, this suggests that the identity of the demon doesn't really matter, because Isla is the true evil of the story that had possessed each of the victims so far. Unlike the previous Conjuring movies, which draw lore from the old grimoire The Lesser Key of Solomon, which appears as a book called The Devil's Welcome in the first Annabelle movie, the dark magic conjured by Isla was inspired by the Italian concept of stregoria, which is just an archaic word for witchcraft. There isn't a specific roster of demons associated with it. So the Warrens see this demon in the form of Isla as it twists and contorts her, before finishing her with this.
Yeah, it's just like she literally breaks all of her bones. Oh my god.
Ed explains that she promised this demon a soul, and it would not go back to hell without one. And that concludes today's lesson on the occultist Isla, the malnourished lady. Click the playlist on the left for my analysis of other evil entities in the Conjuring universe, like Bathsheba, Malthus, and Valen. And remember to subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week.
Oh yeah, the Russian dude. Hereditary is a good movie. I'll get to that soon. This is cool. That's some good stuff. Let's see here. What else can we look up? It's funny you did a Caroline. I want to see some kills from See, like when it comes to like the movie Urban Legend, be cool if they literally go down like a lot of these urban legend routes, like because there's a bunch they can do. Like the killer can do some like crazy shit. Like the first one, like the killer. Spoiler alert. Brenda, I think that's her name. Um, when she's killing people using urban legends, those were like unique and stuff. Um, it's just cool. But the Curious Legacy urban legend. Let's see what is this guy gonna talk about? Let's see what he has to talk about.
Top 5 reasons to switch to Dr. Squatch soap. 1. Save up to $27 when you try bundles like.
Sponsored by Raycon. 1998's Urban Legend is a bit of a paradox to me. It's the kind of horror movie that everyone seems to have seen, yet nobody actually remembers. It's not a misunderstood masterpiece or a forgotten cult classic, but it's one you've more than likely come across at some point in your life. Whether it be in a DVD bargain bin or on the shelf of the local video rental store or watching it during one of its many random appearances on early to mid 2000s late night TV, when I was young, I remember Urban Legend having quite a prominent yet unappealing presence that, when I finally saw it, it turns out I had already seen it too.
The look of the killer too. It's crazy, you know.
Someone's in the back seat!
In its time, it was critically panned as
Amazing kills too.
just another generic slasher looking to shamelessly bank off the popularity of Wes Craven's Scream, but ended up living more so in the shadows of Scream's most successful derivative, I Know What You Did Last Summer, which was penned by Scream's screenwriter Kevin Williamson based on the urban legend of The Hook, and was produced by the same guy behind Urban Legend. In fact, apparently the film's first-time director, Jamie Blanks, wanted to direct Last Summer, but the role was already filled, and Blanks was later hired to direct another Scream-esque slasher in 2001 called Valentine, which itself lived in the shadows of Urban Legend. So what we ended up with was several layers of gradually inferior Scream knockoffs right up until Hollywood went, screw it, let's just fucking remake everything. Regardless, Urban Legend still performed pretty well at the box office despite lacking the blockbuster appeal of Scream and Last Summer. Hence, it really was a film much better suited to modest home viewing long before the age of selling schlock like this to streaming services.
Bloody Mary.
However, the bizarre thing is, Urban Legend is a surprisingly intriguing time capsule of the 90s slasher era, not so much for its quality, as it leaves a hell of a lot to be desired, but how it very lightly touches on the social dynamics of rumor and mistruth, and the potentially dangerous implications urban legends can have on people.
Anyone you know died this way.
Mikey, from the cereal.
What if I told you that this is Mikey?
Now, Jamie Blanks, like he's such an underrated director. You know, when it comes to filmmaking and making film and making story, like he's such a good director, man. Like nobody gives him enough credit. Nobody even talks about it. Same goes with Rusty Cundef. Like nobody talks about these guys. It's insane.
Well, I'm working as an ad executive in New York City. Would you bring some then?
I should clarify, this isn't necessarily a recommendation video, it's more so a look back to see what all the fuss was about, so take my efforts to make this sound appealing with a grain of salt, because I have an extremely forgiving soft spot for nostalgic crap like this. If you're in any way knowledgeable on the historical context of urban legends, the film's insights are going to feel really paper thin, but it works as a pretty cool entry level look at the topic when we're treated to a lecture involving Robert England playing the abnormal psychology professor employed to be both our source of thematic exposition and obvious misdirection.
Something I can help you with.
If you truly want to see urban legends explored with much tighter focus on the underlying social concepts, 1992's Candyman is a vastly superior slasher, which conveniently was made by the same production company behind Urban Legend. Although even if the film wasn't the most informative example of urban legends in cinema, apparently in the 2012 book What Happens Next, Contemporary Urban Legend and Popular Culture, Gail DeVos claims...
Hold on a second. I don't know, man. It's Urban Legend's cool, man. I don't know. The guy's like talking about like, oh, this crap. Nah, it's not that bad, man. It's actually pretty. It's a pretty good slasher film. Smile Dog and all that stuff. Um, yeah, she had like a sex scene. Um, it's crazy. She has. Oh yeah, she died in it too. The kill was fucking amazing. No, it was amazing. Kill was pretty cool. What the fuck? Roseanne. She was on Roseanne. Yeah, she was on TV shows too.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to Ajax Reviews. Today we do something very different. Today I'm going to analyze this interview with Danielle Harris and Tony Moran.
I don't know about the whole Tony Moran situation. Um, I don't know what's happened. I'm just gonna watch this and I'm gonna look it up later because I have no idea what. Oh, okay. It looks right here. Tony Moran thinks his fans. Did he play Michael Myers? Hold on. Oh, he's supposed to be. Oh, he's the. Oh, he's the. Hold on. Ah, I have to get up. He's the fucking dude that was the unmasked Michael. Oh shit, my bad. Still going. Did you watch? Trent, my bad, bro. Hold on. Fuck. Sorry, Trent. Hold on, Trent. Give me a second, guys. I didn't even see because like I was waiting to see what the comments are going and I fuck. so far, from what I'm seeing from this guy is he seems like a piece of shit. Um, um, that's all I gotta say. Just when it comes to um, people and like how they treat each other, especially celebrities, like just treat each other like you treat your friends, treat your family, like treat you with respect. So that's at the end of the day, treat people with respect, and they'll treat you back with respect. So that's all I gotta say on that. It's been fun, 3 hours, man. You know, learn some stuff, watch some cool, entertaining stuff at the same time. So I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time on Horror Talk. Peace out.